Welcome to the Hematology North Clinics. We'd like to invite you on how the new redesigned clinic is going so far, and we'd like to show you how the patients checked in. So come on in. So when the patients check in our clinic, they normally have their hospital blue card ready. Just make sure no OHIP card, because it's very important. They only drop their blue hospital card, and then they have a seat at the waiting area, and they will be called according to their time appointment.
In the new system, we are now taking away the cards and we're stamping the information, all these forms that are required for each patient. We're stamping in all of this information. We have also implemented a new thing. Instead of keeping the cards here, we are now keeping them in the chart. This takes away having to lose the blue card. If, say, the patient comes out and we don't know where the blue card is, everything's right here. So once we have stamped up all the information for each patient, we will then take the chart in the back and slot them in according to the patient's appointment time.
The hub is where we all sit, where we actually do our work, in between going in to see patients in patient rooms. Structurally, we realized that there was a big issue to deal with here because one of the large retaining walls for the building is right in the middle of our clinic. That poses a problem from a visual standpoint because it's right in the middle of the space and hard to work with. So we tried to use it to our advantage. We mounted our large clinical trials board there, which has all of the information relevant for clinical trial patients, so we can see inclusion-exclusion criteria and be able to refer to it fairly easily. The other thing that we were able to do to use it was to subdivide the clinic into various areas, because there may be 2 to 3 different physicians working in this space at any one time. What we were able to do then is to use these new small black chart racks to be able to organize the charting. And so what would happen when a patient checks in for a specific physician, the chart makes its way to the back. It's attached in the area to the black chart rack where the patient will be seen by their physician or nurse. The nurse can then pick it up from there, go in, see the patient, have it return there, and allows to subdivide the clinic into manageable areas. One of the principles that became apparent from the lean exercise was that visual assessment was very important, so that you were always aware of what was stocked and where things were kept. And one of the learning points there was to really try and take all of the doors off, because you could expose things and be able to visually check things quickly to see what needs replacing. So as part of one of our rapid improvement events, we took off all of the doors that then allowed us to see all of this extra space, and gave us the opportunity to clear up a lot of clutter. And whether people were hiding older material in there or not, we were able to get rid of it and then take the available space, because we have to share it between so many people who are in our work environment, to be able to get the maximum usage out of it.
And as you can see from the physical setup, we have all our equipment exactly where we need it. It's similar to a chef preparing a meal. There's a mise en place, which means everything in its place. So we just have to look up here. We can find all the order sheets, transfusions. We don't have to go running all over the clinic to find the necessary paperwork that we might need. We usually sit side by side unless one of us is out in with the patient at the time. It cuts down on our running around from one room to another when we have everything right here in place. If you went into the patient rooms, you'd also find that each of the rooms is set up exactly in the same way, so that anytime any other nurse goes in, they could find all the equipment that they need just as easily as the nurse before them. So if another nurse comes in to take your place, it's much easier to fill in, because everything is the same from one room to the other.
So this would be a typical clinic room in Hematology North. We do a routine check every Friday to make sure all the equipment's working. So great, this isn't working, so we will report that and we will call and either get a bulb or someone in to fix that. We have just a small amount of equipment, and everything that we don't use on a regular basis is to be taken back out. So we'd have blue pads, Kleenex gloves, some Virox for cleaning up, a small amount of linen and gowns for patient exams. And so the rooms are a lot neater and tidier.
We're doing very simple reorganization tasks with regard to forms and equipment and placing of patients in rooms has somehow made the whole experience feel a little bit less frustrating. We know where things are, we know where to find things, and we can actually spend more time focusing on what we're doing in the exam room than wondering if we're going to walk in there and not being able to find a stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, an otoscope. Those are again very simple things, but they allow us to not be distracted while we're interviewing the patients and examining the patients. We can forget about those distractions.
As many of you are aware, a lot of the jobs nurses used to do in at least ambulatory care involved putting patients in rooms, printing notes from the computer and blood results, tracking down information from other centers. They also would spend a lot of time on the computer entering blood work or different procedures that needed to be done. And that did not leave a lot of time for patient education and for nursing assessments of patient problems. So with the redesign and the focus on the patient, and with our change in the flow cells, we are now able to do that much more efficiently. So when we see a patient, we put in all our own blood work. We don't need notes printed because we don't use a chart anymore. We just use the computer, and that frees up a lot of time for the nurses to actually do an assessment on these patients and spend extra time doing clinical care and education.
As far as benefit for the clinic itself, or for us as nurses, it's given us more time to spend with the patients doing nursing care rather than clerical work, chasing paper, doing paper trails. So it's really quite advantageous, I think, as a nurse in this clinic. And I think as far as Dr. Crump is concerned as well, that his footwork is greatly reduced as well by having all of these pieces of equipment and whatnot right in place.
One of the most important aspects of this experience has been for us to focus much more on the patient's perspective. We had an appreciation that our patients were waiting a long time and were frustrated with that, as were we, but we never really sat down and broken it down and looked at the parts of it that were truly responsible and actually see what the magnitude of waiting was that the patients were experiencing. So it was an important exercise for us to go through to really understand what was happening with our patients, not just while we were in the exam room with them, but before and afterwards.